I talk a lot about buying houses in Spain, but what happens after you own a house in Spain and then you want to sell it? What is the process? Do you need a real estate agent? Today I'm going to cover all of this and more, giving you an inside look at what I've learned after buying 3 homes in Spain and then selling 2 of them. Hi, my name is Nicole. Welcome to my channel, Travel to Money, where I share about how to travel, adventure, and have fun on the road to financial independence. Buying and selling homes in Spain is actually a pretty straightforward process until it isn't. There are a few caveats here and there, and I'm going to explain the various situations I've seen. But let's just start from the beginning of the process. What do you need to do to list your home in Spain? Do you need a real estate agent? So, I did a video recently about the lack of regulation when it comes to real estate in Spain. Anyone, even you, can be a real estate agent in Spain. There are literally no qualifications, which, if you're trying to start a real estate business, could be really good for you. But if you're trying to buy or sell a home, you may need to do a bit more due diligence when selecting who you want to help you with the process. Now, because of my channel and the connection to folks I've met through Instagram, when I sold my 2 houses, I reached out to people who I knew were looking because they had become friends and I personally wanted them as neighbors. I'm truly privileged in that way. But if I had wanted to sell my homes and I didn't have specific buyers in mind personally, I would probably list the homes myself. But I'm also pretty decent at photography and writing copy, so determining if you have the skills to create a great listing is probably a good place to start. I'm about to break down what I would do if I were listing it myself, and then what I would do if I was working with an agent. But in either case, I want to mention that part of that lack of regulation over the real estate process in Spain is that sellers' agents or the sellers themselves are not offering commissions to the buyer's agents in a lot of cases. What I've seen on several listings in all caps is no buyer's agent commissions. So I guess it's up to the buyer to pay their agent an agreed upon flat rate or commission. I'm just saying that if you're listing on your own or with an agent, you might want to disclose if you are not planning to share a commission with the buyer's agent. So let's start by going over what I would do if I were going to list myself. I'd start with idealista.com, which is a common site for home listings in Spain. And if you're a private seller, from what I know at the time of filming this video, they won't charge you for a listing. I believe they only charge actual agencies. I'd then take that same listing info and list on realtor.com/international. There are a few other sites you may want to list on too. I'd also probably list it on Facebook Marketplace and let people know in any local Facebook groups. I have a personal philosophy about listings. I think whether you're listing a place on Airbnb for rent or you're trying to sell a home, you should always be as transparent as possible about what a place looks like and any issues it might have. Some people think it's more important to just get people in the door by covering things up, but all that ends up doing is wasting everyone's time, including your own. If you've explained everything, the good and the bad, and thought to answer as many questions as possible in your listing, you will save yourself a lot of time. I digress. Now, some people have reached out about listing on my website. I've done it for a friend and then once for another neighbor, where I create a listing and then share it on my website and to my audience of over 80,000 people who are mostly interested in purchasing a house in Spain. I've really been trying to come up with a process that allows people to list through me, but doesn't waste my time. I'm not going to be someone's agent, so I'm not looking for commissions, but I do think that I'll begin charging a flat fee to create a listing page and then to share it with my audience. If you're trying to sell your house and that's an option that would be helpful to you, you can check out traveltomoney.com/sell for the options we have available. Now, if you're looking for real estate copywriting and photography services, we may be able to assist with that as well, and you can find more info on the page I just mentioned. Anyhow, now let's talk about the option of using a real estate agent. One of the things I find the most odd about real estate in Spain is that in general, agents don't usually get exclusive listings. That is why when you're on sites like Idealista, you may be searching by price and see 5 or 6 different listings of the same house, especially the really expensive houses. And that's because you have 5 or 6 different agents all hoping they'll draw the buyer and get the sale. In these cases, only the agent who brings the buyer gets the commission. Now, what this could mean is that several different real estate agents may be willing to list your property, but it's also hard to get an agent to put much marketing effort into selling a house that they may or may not get a commission on, especially if it's a cheap house and the commission is low. Another common thing to know about in Spain is that often real estate agent rates are flat. So, for example, there is a woman who has been selling houses in my town for ages. She charges somewhere between 7 and 8,000 euro to sell a house, regardless of how much the house is selling for. Of course, if you're selling $1 million home, that's a great deal. But if you're selling a $30,000 home, it's probably not worth it, or you really have to inflate your price to make up some of that money. So, how would I look for a real estate agent if I were selling a house? First of all, I'd probably look for someone who I feel would be really good at marketing and who would do an exclusive deal. But I'd want to know that they were going to take care of photography, video, and listing in multiple spaces. I personally just would not enjoy having to make appointments with different agents and have to keep up with everyone if I had decided to change the price. That's just me. Another thing I'd look for is someone who is bilingual. Not necessarily for my own communication preferences, but because so much of the market is driven by people coming from the UK. So, having an agent that can talk to both the Spanish population as well as buyers from English speaking countries is a must, in my opinion. When looking for an agent, I personally would start with the local Facebook groups by asking for referrals, where I get firsthand knowledge from the community right around me about what agents worked really well for them. Once I had identified an agent, before signing any agreements, I'd have my real estate attorney look over the contract. I'm assuming if you're at the point that you're selling a house in Spain, that you already have a real estate attorney who helped you with the purchase. You'd also want representation with the sale. Okay, so now that we've talked about listings and agents, what happens when you have a buyer? More than likely, you'll have some sort of conversation either between agents or directly between you and the buyer where you'll negotiate the price. Once the price is determined, you'll want your attorney to draw up a contract that lists a reservation deposit and any contingencies that have been agreed upon, such as a house passing an inspection or what happens to the deposit if the buyer backs out. I've seen all kinds of agreements, so it's all up to you and how standard or creative you want to be. Your attorney can help advise you as to what standard items should be part of the contract. Now, let's talk for a minute about deposits and the difference between a cash purchase and selling to a buyer who is taking out a mortgage. There may be two different kinds of deposits. The first is something you might call a reserve deposit. It's not a deposit on a mortgage, but just the first money a buyer is putting down to show their intent to buy the house. I personally would recommend processing all of these transfers via your attorney. So you're not collecting the money as the seller. The attorney is arranging for that money to be held. From what I've read, usually this amount is between 3 and 5,000 euro. One of the stipulations of the contract might be that the buyer doesn't get the deposit back if they decide to back out. But there could also be some exclusions, like if the house failed certain inspections. So all of that should be stipulated in the contract. This is not the same as a deposit put down when obtaining a mortgage. So, for example, when I purchased my first home for 20,000 euro, I sent a deposit for 2,000 euro for the house to basically be held for me. This is usually the point when the seller stops showing the house, except for possible backup offers in the case the buyer backs out. At the point this reservation deposit is made, the sale is pending. Now, if the buyer is paying for the house in cash, the rest of the funds would be due at closing, and the buyer would need to have the funds in their account in Spain for their attorney to handle the transfer. But let's talk for a minute about selling to someone who is obtaining a mortgage. First of all, in Spain, rather than getting pre approved for a mortgage and then shopping for a house, from what I understand, a lot of times a buyer will find the house and then shop for a mortgage based on the house they're purchasing. Now, a buyer can get pre-approved, but it just may not be as common. So a buyer with a pre-approval would be a more attractive buyer than one who hadn't gone through that process yet. The mortgage process in Spain is pretty straightforward. If the buyer is getting a mortgage, the bank will determine the down payment amount for the mortgage separate from the reservation deposit. For a Spanish resident, the mortgage down payment is usually 20%, but for a foreigner or non-resident, this would usually be higher at around 40%. I'm going to do another video soon specifically about obtaining a mortgage in Spain, so be on the lookout for that one if that's something you're interested in. So the bank will work with the buyer to get what they need from them, schedule any inspections, and so on. On your end as the seller, the attorney will need to prepare the title deeds, the energy performance certificate, proof of tax payments, any receipts if there are community expenses like an HOA, and then we'll need recent utility bills to prove that water and electricity are connected. As the seller, once you have a buyer in place, you really don't have to do much. Your attorney should be handling most of the paperwork for you and will communicate with you if they need anything. Now, if you're selling a home that you purchased within recent years, then the process of selling the house shouldn't be all that difficult and everything should be able to take place in a timely manner. Most of the issues I've seen with delays tend to involve homes that haven't been sold in decades, where there is information out of date or they may not have an up-to-date energy certificate. One other thing you may have heard me talk about recently is that if the home was ever repossessed previously, before a purchase can be finalized, your attorney will have to give the government the option to purchase it at the price that your buyer has agreed to. The main disadvantage to a seller in this case is having to give the government an extra 2 months to respond. That can really drag out the sale of a house. For a normal sale without any major issues, you could expect a 30 to 60 day time frame. When I purchased my first home, I owned it within less than 60 days of making that first phone call to inquire about it. Of course, you may need to stay on top of your attorney or agents, especially if you are on a specific timeline. But as I always tell everyone, buying and selling property in Spain requires patience. Okay, so once everything is lined up and in place, your attorney will schedule a date with the notary. This will be an official building where you and your attorney will show up to sign the paperwork. The notary seems to be a very esteemed position in Spain. When I purchased my first house, both myself and the seller were present at the signing, but I'm not sure it's always that common. Okay, so there is one other thing I want to mention, and that is mortgage cancellation. This is something that will take place if you, the seller, still have a mortgage on the house. From what I understand, the cancellation of the mortgage needs to take place before the closing date, since a house can't be sold with any encumbrances. This is something your attorney or the bank can assist you with. Okay, so hopefully I've covered all the details for what you'd need to think about when considering selling your home in Spain. Of course, if I missed something, let me know in the comments, or if you have any questions, let me know there too. If you are buying or selling a house in Spain and want me to help you go over your specific situation, I'm always available for one-on-one coaching sessions at traveltomoney.com/coaching. In an upcoming video, I will be going over your costs if you're planning to sell a house in Spain, which is something you should really consider. So be sure to subscribe and join me every day where travel and adventure build financial freedom. I can't wait to see where your dreams will take you.